Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Interlinked podcast, an official Neo Tokyo podcast powered by Shrapnel. Brace for impact, gamers, and prepare yourself for the sacrifice zone with Shrapnel, the world's first moddable AAA extraction-based shooter, built by a legendary, award-winning team behind some of your favorite games like Call of Duty and Halo. And they are kicking off 2024 with an absolute banger. People are finally going to be able to get their hands on Shrapnel during their early access season. And they are giving away $3 million worth of prizes. So buckle your chin straps and get ready to dive in and try and get your piece of the prize. Huge shout out to our sponsor, Playa3ull Games. They are inspired by gamers and funded by their community. They have a epic game on the Epic Games Store, a third-person shooter called Nexus. Hop on in there and check that out. They're also currently selling nodes, so if you're interested, check that out at their website, twelfth.games. That is a 3 instead of a B on Playable. Now strap in for the rest of this episode of Interlinked. We are joined today by Matt Steffanina. He's taught millions of people to dance through his YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter reach. He's a big player in Web3 gaming and a Neo Tokyo citizen. And we are going to have an amazing podcast. We've got our co-hosts Ben and Jared. How you guys doing today?
Doing
What
great.
up?
So let's dive into it. Matt, would love to start off with a little bit of your background, introduce yourself, and we'll get the conversation rolling.
Yeah, what's up, guys? Thanks for having me. My name's Matt, and I grew up in DC. I was into all kind of sports growing up, gaming, all sorts of stuff. But I moved to a small town when I was 12 and discovered snowboarding, started dancing, just all kind of random activities. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for entertainment where I was from. I started producing music as well. And when I was 18, I started teaching my first dance classes. I joined a dance crew in this small town. And long story short, I moved to LA to pursue some dreams in entertainment. So for the last 12 plus years, I've been a choreographer in Los Angeles. The first few years were really bad, really struggled, as you can imagine, for a guy from Virginia moving to Los Angeles and trying to compete in the entertainment industry. But it was a really great experience. I started a YouTube channel 17 years ago. I was one of the first dancers on YouTube. And that channel today has like 13 million subscribers. I've taught, millions and millions of people how to dance around the world. And that's one of my big passions. But along that journey, I did a lot of touring. I worked with Jason Derulo, with Taylor Swift, Chris Brown, Snoop Dogg, Lil Wayne, Tyga, a lot of hip hop and pop artists. And, over the past 5 years, especially with the pandemic, I was kind of thinking about the next stage of my life, which led me to music, started producing and DJing a lot more, making house music. And ironically, that is what led me to the NFT world specifically. I'd started messing around in crypto in 2017. I'd always been really interested in finance and trading stocks, options, all that sort of stuff. But learned a little bit about crypto, was trading the last, 6 or 7 years. But in 2020, late 2020, I was at the studio when a guy named Beeple walked into my music studio in LA. And he was visiting another friend of mine that produced out of the same studio. And he was telling me about NFTs and how he's a digital artist, but he's selling his stuff online and people were buying it and reselling it. And he had something selling for like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I was like, man, this is crazy. So I dove in a little further. Tim Kang, a good friend of mine, he goes by Illustrator. He was with people that night and helped me buy my first NFT, which was by my good friend Blau. And that was the first thing I ever owned. That was my introduction. And from there, I sort of went down the rabbit hole on Nifty Gateway. That led me to eventually, open collections, OpenSea, and all of the apes and punks and craziness that was just starting at that time. I was really early into Bored Apes, and I was eventually around for the Becker and Elio mint, which led me to Neo Tokyo. So sort of a long, twisted journey to get here from dance to music, but I ended up in the space and just been really fascinated with it ever since.
And how did you go from diving into all that and then eventually becoming a citizen. Maybe you can kind of tell that story and a little bit about your thesis on Web3 gaming, why that appeals to you. I know you mentioned kind of being a gamer before, but maybe we could just double click on that and really dive in.
Yeah, I think, the reason a lot of us are so enthused on Web3 gaming, I think, is because we all experienced the previous, Web2 gaming, if you will, where as a kid, I would buy, you know, Fortnite dollars, or I want to unlock a map or whatever, and I pay money for it and I get the thing. And then that's it. The gaming studio keeps the money. I did a lot of motion capture choreography and dance work. So I'd put it the mocap suit. I did some stuff for Just Dance. I did a few other games that I'm blanking on right now, but I would go in and I would do mocap for these games, and they would pay me a day rate, and that was it, right? So there were all these things where an action, whether by the gamer or by a creator, in my sense, was doing something, and then it was a very solid endpoint, and that was it. There was no licensing, there was no you can sell it back, there's no you can trade it for this or that. It was just an endpoint. And I think the thing that fascinated me so much when I first started to understand the idea of Web3 gaming and is that people don't need to understand that crypto is attached to it in any way, shape, or form. They just, the same way you buy Fortnite dollars and you go buy a skin, you can buy a token that's tradable, and you can buy a skin that is also tradable, an NFT, right? It can be the same exact user transaction, but now the fact that I'm able to resell that or trade that, or if I have the token and the game really successful, or I play the game really well, I can be rewarded in the token and I can trade that back for actual dollars, or I can buy more skins and use like, the possibilities are so endless, and they really reward the players and the creators and all of the people involved in the game besides just the gaming studio, which I think is really, in the end, is good for everyone. But obviously in the short term, there's going to be a lot of resistance. I kind of equate it to when I was in the music industry and Spotify and Apple Music came around, and all of a sudden people were able to buy singles or stream music, and the record labels really hated it, obviously, because they wanted you to buy the 17 song album, which only 2 songs were good, and they wanted you to pay $20 for it. And so they resisted it. Eventually, streaming kind of won out, and now you have a situation where independent artists have a chance. Whereas before there was very much a wall. It was very much a gatekeeping situation. So I think the same thing is potentially going to happen with gaming. And I think it's really good for the players. I think it's really good for people like me who are involved in the game in some way, shape, or form creatively. And so that's why I've been supportive of it. To answer kind of how I got in, so I was on a tour when the whole Neo Tokyo puzzle thing was happening. So I was every day and night, like in between whatever I had, shows or meet and greets or whatever, I was like getting on my computer, trying to solve these problems. I'm in the Discord. I'm in like text chats with like 4 of my other friends that are all trying to do this. And it was a nightmare. Like I was like falling behind every step of the way. I feel like it would have even been difficult if I wasn't in the middle of running around the world. So I was not able to mint, but on the morning of the mint, I posted this on Twitter, this story, but I was actually in the gym and I'd given up. I was like, I'm not going to be able to mint it, but my friends and I were working out, and I had my laptop open at the gym and just to open see, and I was just refreshing, and I was watching people relist that had minted, and I was able to get 2 S1s. I think around 7 ETH or so. One of them was a really high ranking one. I kind of picked up one right away, and then I scrolled through a little deeper to try, it was just the code. So I was like a ghost, an assassin. I don't know, assassin sounds strong. It was like, you were kind of picking based on stupid logic. But I ended up getting 2 S1s and was really excited about that.
Oh, you did pretty well because that ramp up was pretty quick because I bought in same sort of situation, missed the initial mint, and that ripped up to like 13 in a couple of hours and then like kind of came back down just a bit. So it was good to even get in like that early.
Yeah, yeah, it was. It's so hard when mints happen like that because what is the fair market price, or where is it going to kind of settle? It could have easily come all the way back down to 2, or it could have done what it did and ripped over the next few weeks as high as it did. So it was a gamble, but I just, I saw what was happening in the space, and I still to this day, like I've never sold a Neo Tokyo asset. I think I have 4 or 5 S2s. Like I've only accumulated, I've never sold. And it's one of the only projects that I haven't sold. And the reason is because I believe that gaming, Web3 gaming is inevitable. And I do think that there needs to be somewhere that people can come that want to invest at a high level and get information at a high level and have it vetted by people that are actually in the industry. And I think that this is right now is by far the leader. There's not even really a close second in my mind. There's a lot of really great projects, DAOs, and sort of like Wolves DAO is great. And there's places that are doing research and all of that. But if you're coming at a place of more the investment side and just really building out a community of the builders and the game studios and all the things that are inside Neo Tokyo, I haven't seen anyone doing it better than Elio and Becker and the Neo Tokyo community.
So jumping back into kind of your where your origin story, if you will, there's definitely like something that most people have not done, which is to build an incredible media company and media business, which is your main YouTube channel. Can you maybe kind of talk us through like what was your secret sauce there? Like how did you kind of make that click, and to kind of bring it full circle, like how are you seeing the Web3 projects and games are very visually driven? What are you seeing them do right, and what are you seeing them do wrong, in your opinion, when it comes to kind of building out their presence on these different platforms?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think what I did right, and I think it still stands true, even 10 years later than when I built a lot of my following, is at the end of the day, it's storytelling and it's familiarity. People can watch a clip can go viral, you can get hundreds of millions of views, but you can get very little from that in the sense of followers that aren't actually engaged or don't really care about your project or whatever it may be that you're trying to push them to or that your page is about. It's much more important than getting, I have 5 billion views, but I have certain videos that got 100,000 that I think were more valuable than other videos that might have gotten 50 million. And the reason is because that video really told part of my story, or it made people feel something, where I know the 100,000 people that watch that video, if they subscribe, they're going to be followers for life. They're going to be with me on the journey. They're going to be supportive. Whereas some fun dance video I made, it was funny, people will be like, oh, that was cool, let me follow this guy. But they're not really tapped in the same way. So I always look at it from both sides. I think both are important, right? You need the viral videos that do the crazy numbers to just get awareness and get people looking at what you're doing. But then you really need to drive home some type of a message and a purpose. And I think, personally, Becker and Elio in our space are two of the best at doing it, because they're not just calling picks. A lot of people are like, buy this, buy that, buy this, buy that. But they teach fundamentals as to their strategy, why they're looking at something, why this worked, why it didn't. And, they admit, like, they're not the best traders or whatever, but giving your opinion and giving an explanation instead of just blindly picking things. For me, it was dance. So, me teaching you how to do the moves I'm doing and not just being like, look, I'm cool, I can dance, but like, no, I want to help you guys too. And not only that, but I'm going to do a tour. What country should I come to? Okay, I have a really big following in India right now. Fuck it. I'm booking a workshop in India next week. I'm going to get a flight and I'll see you guys there. Who's coming? Right now, there's like an energy about it. There's excitement about it. It's interactive instead of just me on a screen. And so I always try to take whatever it is that I'm creating in content and really make it feel like there's something past the screen. And so, I think when you ask about Web3 games, who's doing it well and who's not, there's a lot of different strategies. I think the biggest thing that we saw in the last run is that a lot of stuff was really heavy on gameplay. And a lot of people were talking about like graphics and, oh, these graphics aren't as good as those graphics. This is going to flop. And, and then we kind of started, hopefully, to all realize that a lot of that was fake anyway. And people were just taking, things and reskinning them and doing all kinds of stuff. And also, too, the most fun games that we all played growing up, most of them didn't have good graphics. Like, as much as I love great graphics, it really doesn't matter that much, right? It's like, why did Angry Birds blow up? I don't know. People think slingshotting a bird across the screen and hitting some stuff is fun, and they played it. That's it, So I think that a lot of games were focusing a little bit too much on their details and their specs and all these technical assets and forgetting that most of the people, especially in gaming, are not gamers. They're not hardcore gamers. And really, if you want to become mainstream, in one of our other shows that we have a gaming space, Twitter space that we do on Mondays called Simplified. And one of the guys always talks about the mom test. Like, would your mom play this game? Would she think it's interesting? If she saw a TikTok about it and the characters were doing fun things, would she think that was fun? And obviously that's not the end all be all. There's some games that are really technical and that's amazing and they're made for gamers. But when we talk about a game breaking through and becoming the next Fortnite, it's probably not going to be the game with the best graphics, with the most intricate gameplay. It's probably going to be something a little bit simpler. And so I think that's why you're seeing a lot of attention go to like, pudgy penguins and stuff right now. Like they're just making the penguins are jumping around and it's cute and people are sharing it and they're talking about it, right? It's like sometimes it's better to go a way that's a little bit more relatable in the beginning, and then you can kind of dive a little bit deeper into the weeds instead of coming out of the gate with like all this stuff that only the highest level can really understand, and you're sort of alienating the bulk of your potential audience.
I think that's such a great point. I mean, Farmville's such a good example of onboarding so many non-gamers. It might be one of the greatest, like sort of like onboardings on top of maybe Candy Crush, Angry
Yeah.
Birds, another great example, but all games that just ended up gripping like sort of the huge chunk of non-gamers. And as you said, it certainly wasn't graphics.
Yeah, I mean, we, all have a pretty good sense of what it takes to make a very high level game, the amount of budget and time and size of team. It's very, very, very difficult. So, I'm rooting for a lot of these high level Web3 games, but I have a sense that it might be one of the simpler ones that sort of breaks through first. And then over time we start to see some of these really pick up steam.
And what was your gaming base? Did you play a bunch growing up? Were there particular types of games that ended up gripping you?
I mean, I started my first like real game that I was ever into was Warcraft 2. So before all the online Warcraft 3 nonsense, and then I went to StarCraft. I loved like strategy games. I loved shooters. I grew up playing like 007 and sports games. I was kind of all around, even Zelda and Final Fantasy. I played a little bit of everything. I would say StarCraft probably had the most time logged in. And then my brother Sam, he's a gamer. He started to get better than me at everything. And, by the time like Call of Duty came around, he was just kicking my ass and everything. And then it became less fun. So these days I don't get to play as much, but now being back in the space more and having the show, it's been cool. I've been getting to check out some of these new games, which is really exciting.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about the show and like, everybody's kind of figuring out their own way to like, play the game here. What have you kind of found is like worked well for you guys with the show, and like what's the strategy there? How you're bringing some of your learnings from previous work into this?
Yeah, the show's called Simplified, and it's on Twitter, Mondays, 8 p.m. Eastern. And the point of the show is to simplify Web3 gaming because there are a lot of rabbit holes to dive into. My audience traditionally is from dance, they're from music, they're from entertainment. They don't know a whole lot about gaming or crypto, but I think that over the next 3 to 5 years, they're going to find out about it, whether it's because the game that they love is a Web3 game and they're like, wait, what do you mean I can trade the things that I'm buying for token? They're going to find out about it inevitably. So I would rather them find out about it now. And I would rather them find out about it in a way where they're educated properly instead of falling into a scam or playing some game because someone's like, you can make a bunch of money, and then they don't understand what they're really doing. And so it's sort of for us, it's a way to bridge the gap. And people that aren't too familiar with crypto, with the gaming space and what's all happening can come on and talk to, experts. We bring on a panel every week of people that are much, much smarter than me in the space. And we talk about topics and we ask questions and we argue over, is this game legit or did they get all their graphics off of a stock website and they're just punking everybody? And, is this a game where you should mint the token or should you just play it and enjoy it and not sweat about the crypto side of it? And so we kind of come at it from just a realistic, logical perspective. Even though I've been in the crypto space for a while. I wouldn't say that I'm an amazing trader. I wouldn't say that I'm super knowledgeable on gaming. So it's also selfishly, it's a way for me to ask all of my really smart friends the questions that I'm wondering about. And I hope that, people along the way get value out of that. But I think, for me, my audience, like, okay, 13 million subscribers. I have 3.5 million on Instagram and 8 million on TikTok. Like, all these numbers are great, but I can't just be like, hey guys, go follow my crypto show and they're going to all just come, right? There has to be some sort of bridge. There has to be an onboarding. There has to be a reason that it makes sense. So the main point of the show is just to help kind of bridge that gap, and people that are curious feel like, okay, this is a great starting point for me. And I feel like I can understand some of the terminology, because there's gaming and Web3 have their own unique languages that if you come in to a hardcore, like, Discord just out of the blue cold, you're not going to understand most of the words that are flying around in there.
Oh, absolutely. Interesting if there's been have you looked into any crossover from the dancing into the crypto? Is there any plans for any like dance to earn projects?
Yeah, yes. So there's a few things that I've sort of started, and a few roadblocks, and a few things that I want to continue. So one of the things is I built the first dance studio in the metaverse. I built it in Decentraland. It's not currently open just because after 2021, 22, not as many people are running around in Decentraland. But the build is there. So once the sort of metaverse traffic picks up, you will be able to go in there and go to different rooms. They'll all have different dance tutorials, so you can learn how to do a moonwalk, or you can learn choreography by your favorite dancer. And it's really fun actually to play around. One thing that needs to happen is the headset needs to get a little bit lighter to really take advantage of it, because it is tough to like dance a lot with that thing on your head. And then, yeah, foot traffic into some metaverse where people are really looking for that type of thing. But I've been exploring a lot. I built out an NFT collection too. I haven't released this anywhere, but one of the one-on-ones that I did is a dance battle between my Bored Ape and my Cool Cat. And I did all the mocap for it. It's a sick animation. They're in this like futuristic, almost like gladiator type arena, but it's like futuristic. And they have this dance battle back and forth, and it's a really sick video. So I started building out some art. And then obviously Dance to Earn is an amazing concept. We have a similar type of live event. I would say it's maybe most similar to like a VFriends type of project, where I have an online community. I have a company where we teach people how to dance online, and we host tours and events. And so at some point, I would love to integrate a Dance to Earn type of concept, where if you're a member of this, you get an NFT. But if you complete certain dance challenges, post videos, do those types of things, you can get more access to different events and a leveled up experience. Obviously, all of that takes time, and it takes a lot of people to execute. So we're sort of building slowly, I would say, in the background. Everything is kind of there, and just waiting for really the market timing to be correct. Once people, like I say, are in the metaverse, we're going to have dancing as an option. So I expect all of you guys to be in the virtual dance studio learning some fire moves.
Oh, I'll be dancing my virtual ass off. That'll be fun. So as you're going about and like building this stuff out, and obviously, you've got just an enormous presence online, and you have worked with, so many high profile people, like, what are you seeing the discussions like in those kinds of rooms? Like in the, the names that you mentioned before, like, how are these people thinking about Web3? How are these people thinking about gaming? Are you trying to go and like listen to what they say, and if they're interested, you're like, double clicking on that? Or like, how are you kind of playing that? What are those conversations like?
Yeah, it depends on the artist. It's very split. You have people like Blau, like Steve Aoki, and the music community that obviously really understand what's happening here, and they want to push. Don Diablo also, like, leading edge. They're trying different stuff, drops, like all types of creative approaches to it. I would say the majority are still very confused by it. They've heard the words, their teams have mentioned NFTs in a collection, and your token, your ticket is a token. And, they're like, they know the buzzwords, but I would say the actual education and integration of it is still a little ways out. I think that it has to come from, culture and also security first. I think the ETF approval, while it sort of was a sell the news in a way, and we're kind of seeing a little bit of a pullback after the hype of that, I think that things like that are going to go a long way in artists and celebrities taking real steps in this space. Oh, okay, now my grandma knows what Bitcoin is and she's trading it. Well, that kind of solidifies in my mind that crypto's not so dangerous. So the next time my team brings up doing something in the crypto space, yeah, okay, like grandma knows about Bitcoin. How crazy could it be? So I think we're still a ways out. The conversations are definitely happening, but I think we just saw so many scam projects last run. It was like, I don't know, every week I felt like Travis Scott or someone was like dropping a new NFT in a thing, and then it just rugged. And so it kind of got a bad rep with like artists and celebrities, even companies. There were a lot of companies that did not necessarily rugs. I don't even think a lot of them were rugs. It was just like, Time Magazine and Pepsi and all these companies, Adidas, were jumping in with solid ideas, but it just didn't really pan out financially for a lot of the early investors. I know that I took a hit on some of them. So I think people are a little hesitant, but in the end, it's like everything else that's new. There's always going to be excitement. Then there's resistance, and then slowly it creeps into culture. And then next thing you know, you can't even imagine going to a concert where your ticket is an NFT and you can't be rewarded in the future. It'll just be part of our culture and our sort of way of doing business. But I think those rooms, to answer your question, are a little bit hesitant, still curious, but hesitant right now, mostly.
Interesting. How is Fortnite? To me, I have two kids, and they are constantly doing the Fortnite dances. How have you seen like games like Fortnite, where I think, strangely enough, like dancing is a very, very large, important part to Fortnite. How have you seen that sort of influence, say the younger generation who's playing that a lot, and how does that sort of cross over to your audience with the the gaming and the dancing? I love it. My kids and I do that a lot. It's a lot of fun. So
yeah, it doesn't, right? I mean, I think anyone dancing for any reason and enjoying dance in any way, shape, or form at the end of the day is great for dance. It's like if any gaming project in Web3 gaming does well, it's great for all of Web3 gaming, no matter what kind of game, right? You just need some eyeballs and some social proof, and that's what it gives us. So Fortnite, I would say, has created a cultural phenomenon where people are just doing these dances and it's fun and they're not judged for if they're good or not. It's more just like, hey, I know this fun dance, this fun dance, right? So I think for that, it's great. As far as industry wise, there's been a lot of kind of fallout between the dance industry and Fortnite because they took all those moves illegally. They didn't credit or pay any of the dancers and choreographers. So there's been a few lawsuits and things back and forth, and a lot of people posting being unhappy about that. A lot of games, for the record, have done it legally. Just Dance, for instance, brought me into choreograph. The other one I did was Uncharted, which I was super stoked on because I'm a huge fan of Last of Us and Uncharted and everything that Naughty Dog does. I think they're incredible. So I think that, if it's done the right way and the choreographers are brought in and credited, it's an amazing thing all around. Working with a Web3 game now, I'm actually doing all of their mocap dances and taunts and things like that. And I just sent them all the mocap files the other day. And we're working on a model where they will pay me a licensing fee or a commission on any of the dances that are sold in the game. And so it's a structure that just feels more fair. It incentivizes me to want the game to be out there and people to do the dances and make content around the dances and all these types of things. And in turn, it gives them, great content for their game. So I think we're going to see more structure like that. I think, the old school model that I always go back to music because music is a little bit ahead in the journey of sort of what's happening now with gaming. But like music had that, right? With the gatekeepers and the labels, and no one could get in. And then the walls kind of came down, and now everything is getting a little bit more fair for artists. There's still some work to go, and that's why you see people like Kanye, going crazy about his contract and stuff. But like it's getting there. The power is sort of getting back into a more fair realm, and I think the same thing is happening with gaming, with this play to earn and players being rewarded for pushing games and spending time in games. Also, things like this, if I put effort into a game. But at the end of the day, what Fortnite did for dance and for gaming and onboarding is a huge win for all of us. So I think at the end of the day, we're all very, very grateful for the success there. And for them integrating it, like they could have just stuck with taunts and flexing and, whatever. And the fact that they wanted to even put dancing into the game, as much as, like I said, there has been some backlash, but overall, everyone in the dance community is very grateful.
That's interesting. I love how you brought up the issue of, and we talk about digital property rights all the time. So when the Copyright Act in 1909 first came out, choreography wasn't a part of it. I don't know if you've heard of Hanya Holm, but she's the first person to get Kiss Me Kate. It's the first person to get a choreographed move copyrighted. So, and she was, I think, very instrumental in helping that legislation move on. And then the Copyright Act of 1976, which amended the one from 1909, actually adds choreographing into it. And there's a legal definition of it. But interestingly enough, you can get a copyright on your choreographed moves. And can you talk a little bit about, I don't know if you've ever sort of had, I know you do a lot of, you said classes and on your Twitter, the Simplified show. I was wondering if you've ever talked to people about, how to best protect their choreographing and their property rights, including, the dance moves, which I think is a kind of a fascinating section of law when it comes to dance moves. And I don't, I didn't know a lot about that. We do copyright here at my law firm, and I've never copyrighted a choreographed move before. I would love to. So if anybody out there wants to hire me to do that, let me know. But yeah, could you talk a little bit about that? I think that's an interesting, fascinating part that you brought up. And, it's, shame on companies that, don't pay the creative people that come up with the moves in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, we might have to do a deeper dive after this and have a chat. From my understanding, and I'm not very well educated on it, but there haven't been many instances until recently where a dancer suing for any type of copyright infringement has had a chance. It's just been recently where this is finally kind of coming to light that, like, hey guys, like there are cases where it's clear infringement. Part of the problem is that dancing is very blurred. The areas are very gray, right? Like if I copyright a phrase, a song, ba-da-ba-ba-ba, I'm loving it, and you do that, like it's pretty obvious that that's what it is. But if I do a slide to the right, kick my leg, turn around, it's a little like you did it slightly different than me, and your foot was pointed, and I was looking to the left when I did it. And, there's a lot of sort of gray areas that make it hard. Also, traditionally, too, the dance community is not the most well-funded or well-educated. So I think there's a lot of cases in the past where things were blatantly stolen, and the dancer choreographer that was the owner of that IP just didn't know how to properly go after it. And there's other cases too. Like I've had my routines used at, for instance, an NFL halftime show. One time someone sent me a video on Twitter. This is like, probably 7 or 8 years ago. It was before Instagram even had videos. They sent it on Twitter and they were like, isn't this your choreography? And they're in like the nosebleed seats, like zoomed in on the cheerleaders. And I'm like, wait a second, And on the one hand, I'm like, you know what? I'm grateful that people loved my choreography enough to put it on the field at a halftime show. That's an honor. But also like even just an email like, hey man, like we're using your stuff and like, we're going to give you some free tickets to the game or something. A lot of times that's enough if it's not anything too egregious. But I do think in video games, especially if you're selling an emote, at that point, it's a direct sale. It's not like a part of a show. If it's part of a live thing and you use a couple of my moves, have at it. But I think in cases like an emote where it's a direct use of the choreography for sale, that's where there should be some sort of commission or revenue split to the creator of that. The same way there would be for music if you sing my lyrics, or a movie scene if you use my movie scene in your movie. Like, all that I think anyone wants is a little bit of fairness across the board. But it is a tough one because dance, like I said, it's very subjective. So it's harder to sort of build strict rules around it. And also,
Yeah, and I think they're. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
just the idea that like it in a way that music is too. It's like you can play the same four chords that are in 100 other songs, right? So like we all kind of agree that you can't copyright a chord progression in a song, but you can copyright a melody. So like where is that with dance too? Like, oh, that's a common step. So that one's not copyrightable, but that's an uncommon step. So that is copyrightable. It's like it gets into the weeds a bit for sure.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think the courts and copyright battles, as far as dance goes, have sort of bifurcated the choreograph or choreography versus a dance move. And I think that that's one of their issues, where a certain dance move may not be copyrightable or to be registered with the Copyright Office, but the entire choreographed set of dance moves together is what they would consider and I think a lot of that, like you're saying, there's not a lot of case law on that, and I think it's kind of interesting that it's almost like exactly like you said, if they're not well funded, then people like Epic, who certainly are well funded, their lawyers are going to sort of dance all around, no pun intended, the other lawyers, and it's kind of unfair. And that, I think that happens a lot, not just in dance, but sort of, in general. So, hopefully, to me, in my mind, I think Web3 actually is going to help a lot of that, where, certain services will be able to, especially with AI, so as a lawyer, for example, I can do maybe 10 letters in the same amount of time as, say, 5 years ago it would take you to write one letter, right? So that means that services will be cheaper, and then they'll be able to be offered to more people and more sectors of the economy, including dance. And I think that's hopefully where Web3 comes in, and the economies of it all will help sort of bring everybody up to be able to use those services. And I think that's one of the best things about it. That's my sort of take on that. But I really think that that copyright issue with dance, I think that's kind of ripe to be brought up to the Supreme Court and say, hey, why can't you copyright a dance move? And like the moonwalk, for example, right? I mean, that's a perfect sort of thought into that. But that's, we don't have to get into that too much, but I always kind of go off on the legal tangent.
Every time someone does the moonwalk at a wedding, they owe that creator 15 cents. Start paying up, people.
That's it.
Well, my hope would be that like companies are almost incentivized to start to give credit, just so that they can tap into those communities, saying, this famous choreographer, this famous, let's say it was a move, the like thing that's popping up to my head as a stupid example is the dice move and Knocked Up, so that you can then go and like kind of get that little bit of a lift saying, oh, we got this from, I'm sure he didn't choreograph that himself. Maybe he did. But just the ability to like plug that for a part of the game. I mean, now Fortnite's getting such a massive lift by putting, Dragon Ball Z characters into it, Rick and Morty characters, whatever it is. And then they get this big lift from the community. I mean, it worked on me. Once I saw, I was like, okay, I can run around there as Goku. Like I might have to re-download like Fortnite because that's too cool.
Yeah.
So sometimes hopefully the incentives like force people to start to give credit at least to the big dogs.
Yeah, with all of this, I think the main thing is that at the end of the day, nobody wants for dance to become unfun in the way that some legal things have made other arts unfun, where you can no longer do anything because you might be stepping on someone's toes. And, like dance is expression, it's free, it's fun. The only thing that we're really trying to protect at the end of the day is the people who spend their entire lives, their entire careers creating these sequences in this thing, and that's how they feed their kids and pay their rent. And it's not like, oh, you did my move, you did my move, you did my move. It doesn't need to be like that. It's more so the like egregious, like you were saying, like they stole a whole sequence from a music video that someone with 25 years experience really spent time putting into. That's more so what ideally would be protected at a high level.
Makes a lot of sense. So I kind of want to talk a little bit more about this intersection of dance and gaming. Obviously, the whole point of of our pause really to kind of go towards the bleeding edge of what's going on there in the gaming world. Like, are you seeing opportunities like for, let's say, somebody who their talents are in dance or in creative or something, like, are you seeing a future where, let's say, we go more towards a digital future, which I think is inevitable, and people are spending more time online, like the things that were interesting or cool or culture defining in the physical world are also going to be replicated most likely in the digital world. So how do you see that, like, how do you see that integration? How do you see that coming together even more? And like, who do you see really standing at the front, or at the vanguard of doing this right and really being a leader in this space?
Yeah, I think that there's a huge amount of white space in gaming marketing, and in particular Web3 gaming marketing right now. I kind of touched earlier on the fact that a lot of games are focusing very heavily on the technical aspects, which are obviously important, but at the end of the day, that's not a lot of times what drives eyeballs and players. I think that there is a huge opportunity for games to start leveraging dance in their marketing. And the way that we started to do it when I was working with Naughty Dog on Uncharted and stuff is I come in and I do mocap, right, for your game. You then have your characters, your main characters, doing these taunts or these dances, or it can be a flip, it can be anything you want, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be dance choreography. But what's really fascinating to people isn't that, okay, the main character is doing this dance choreography. It's really the process of how that gets made. So what I've started to do is shoot also like a behind the scenes, right? So you have me in a mocap suit on a green screen doing this weird mocap emote dance, whatever it is. And that's on the bottom half of the screen. And then on the top half of the screen, you have the final product of the character in world doing it after a celebration, after they did something cool or got a kill or whatever it is, right? And you start to see this connection to like, wow, these people aren't just sitting in a studio clicking some buttons and then a game is done. There's a process, right? Or even making a BTS video of, I make this footage, I send it to the guys, and then over their shoulder, you see them cleaning up the animation, and then you see them putting the character in there and testing it in a different world. And you start to get this idea and this feel for all of the energy and the care that goes into these games, and you start to care about it more. Now, that doesn't mean that people are going to play your game and they're going to love it. You still have to make a good game, but the piece that's missing a lot of times is that desire and that emotional connection. And so, whether or not it's exactly the way that I'm laying it out, it's just one way that I think games can market in a creative way. But I think rather than really dope trailer, really cool gameplay video, those are all great. We know everyone needs to do those and should do those, although some games launch without even those, or at least launch their token in NFTs. But those are sort of like in general the prerequisites. But I think then the next step is, how do you get creative and set this game apart? And the game that I'm working with now is called Zorans, and I've been doing emotes and mocap and stuff for them, and they're really thinking about that. Like, what are some things we can do that on socials will get non-gamers to watch this TikTok and then be like, what game is this? Right? And take a step further. And I think that that's how gaming studios have to think now. It's no longer about, oh, you're in the front of GameStop and you license someone, you license Madden's name and he's on the cover and people are going to buy it because it's the only football game and it's in GameStop. Like, it's not like that anymore. If you have a really cool shooter, there's probably 1,000 other ones that are coming out in the next year that are almost as good as yours, or whatever it is, maybe better, right? So the gaming studios, just like artists, and I keep comparing this to music because it's so similar, gaming and what happened with music. What happened with music a few years ago is that DJs were starting to get really frustrated. Artists were starting to get really frustrated because they were dropping songs and no one was listening. And then they were looking online, and these kids that were making these stupid TikToks in their room had 100 million streams on their song. And they're going, this is messed up. I've got a label, I've got a budget, I made this music video, I did this thing. Why is my song not streaming? And this kid who's getting viral clicks, he's all of a sudden making more money than me. And the same thing is going to happen with gaming. The game studios that stay in the old way of we just do a marketing campaign and we put it out and we send to our email list, they're going to get left in the dust by the games that come in, like these, you mentioned Candy Crush and Farmville. What's the next Candy Crush that has Web3 integration that comes in and just makes a game that's so addicting and so fun and so visually stimulating that people just want to put it on their social media? I'd be like, look at my high score and look what I did. And I got this funny character and write all these like memes and jokes and fun things. And it goes viral. They're going to beat out the company that's spending hundreds of millions of dollars building an amazing game with no marketing plan. So I think now more than ever, I always talk about I'm a social media creator, but I'm not a fan of social media. I don't particularly like to sit there and scroll on social all day. I kind of post my stuff and I get off of there. But I know that for my business, whether it's dance, whether it's music, whether it's the gaming Twitter space, whether it's my YouTube channels, no matter what it is, I need to leverage social to get eyeballs. It's the quickest and the cheapest way to acquire a lot of attention really, really, really fast. And so these gaming studios that are getting so in the weeds on their games and not focusing on how they can get their game out there, I think are going to have a really, really tough time. And, I'm not a holder of Pudgy Penguins. I have a Bored Ape, but I really think if they decide to release a game, some of the things that these IPs are doing with just creating Twitter accounts, AOF Verse also, really successful TikTok, and they're just making silly TikToks to the average person scrolling by. They don't really know. They don't know that it's a Web3 project. They don't know anything about it, but it's cute and it's fun and they follow. And when the game drops, they're probably going to get it because they're like, oh, I love those characters. And, so I think that dance is one way to do it. I'm obviously a big supporter of using dance in gaming. I think it's amazing. But, any type of creative that can get involved in posting content that doesn't look like a trailer or just a typical gameplay walkthrough, I think is really going to resonate with people in that storytelling format.
Well said. Really well said. Yeah, I think there's a lot for games and studios and creators to really think about there of how to really mesh the game and the product and you're actually building and then the story that you're telling through the creative. That to me is an art and a science. And there aren't that many people I think who are really, really, really good at that, but there's enough to where we can kind of look at it and be like, all right, yeah, they're doing it right. Let's learn from them. Let's maybe emulate them a little bit. Okay, so we have a bunch of topics as well. We want to make sure that we start to cover some of the stuff that's kind of happened in this past week. So I think probably one of the bigger ones is actually going to fall within the legal corner. Jared, I know this is one of my favorite segments of the show is our legal corner, but we've had some big stuff going on in the world of Web3 law. So I'm going to kick it over to you, my friend, and take us through. It's a fascinating story.
Yeah. So this, past, 6 months has been really interesting. The SEC has been, ramping up their enforcement actions and really focused on crypto. I think they added 20 specific enforcers in 2022. They sued Coinbase, stating that there are 4 different sections of Coinbase. So that's their spot exchange where you just go and you say, I have USD and I want to trade it for BTC. That is violating the SEC's rules. Their Prime, which is their really institutional arm that, let's say JP Morgan Chase wants to buy, $4 billion of, Bitcoin, like they would go through the Prime part of Coinbase. And then they have their wallet, which uses a Nexo coin token, I believe. So they're saying that violates it. And then there's staking protocols where, I think there's quite a few. There's maybe like 10 cryptocurrencies that they currently say, if you stake with us, we'll give you a percentage. So the SEC sued them about 6 months ago. This is a very, very early part of the case. So there was a complaint, which is the SEC's actual physical lawsuit that says these are all the things you did wrong. Coinbase then files an answer, which says all these numbered paragraphs that you say we did wrong, we actually didn't. And then this is a very sort of interesting part of federal procedure, and it's a 12C motion, which is it's very rare, but it's a judgment on the pleadings, which I won't get too in depth in that. But essentially, what it means is whatever was written down in the Coinbase complaint. The SEC wrote it, right? So then the Coinbase complaint against Coinbase is saying, okay, we agree that, for the purposes of this motion, all those things are going to be agreed to as true, but we still win, and here's why. So basically, the SEC is saying and this is like the Howey test. Everyone's heard that so many times, and it's literally in the first paragraph of the complaint and in the response from Coinbase. So they're saying that it is, you don't really need, sort of in a way, it's much more in depth and complicated than I'm explaining it. But SEC is saying you don't really need a contractual investment contract. You can have a scheme. And the scheme is basically you take your money, you put it onto Coinbase, and you expect that it's going to go higher. And that this is essentially violating the Securities Act. All these different cryptocurrencies, and they've said 12 of them are indeed securities. And Coinbase said this is really important, that we're really talking about the secondary market here. So this case is not going to be trailblazing for the people who are coming out with new cryptocurrencies. This is a secondary market considered a security. And to me, I honestly think, and there's lots of legal, scholars and people, especially with Bloomberg, who think there's a 70% chance that Coinbase wins this flat out on this motion, which is, I think, very, very interesting. So, not getting too far into it, but Coinbase is essentially saying under Howey, even if it is the secondary market, that we're relying on the essentially the work of others, which would be Coinbase, and we're expecting a return on that. So Coinbase is saying, hold on a second here. Number one, we are not a broker. We're essentially taking people who want to buy cryptocurrency and people who want to sell cryptocurrency, and we're putting them together. It's very simple. You want to buy, you want to sell, you can go to our software and you can get connected on that. So it's definitely not a investment contract under the Howey test. And so the SEC is saying, well, okay, it's actually not the cryptocurrency itself that is, and this was their argument, and I listened to the nearly 5 hours of oral argument on this case. So I was sort of looking, as an aside, I was looking at the lawyers that Coinbase had, and this is, again, super really early. You don't really win the cases a lot of times in this sort of motion. I was like, they probably spent like $1 million preparing for this. I looked at the list of lawyers and kind of thinking how much they charge an hour, and I was like, Coinbase is getting the Sherman tanks, and they're going after the SEC, no holds barred. I was quite impressed. By the way, the judge, the lawyers for the SEC, and the lawyers for Coinbase, I would commend all three of them. They all knew exactly what they were talking about. The judge went a little bit different and essentially asked the SEC for an hour and a half questions, and then turned it over to Coinbase and asked similar questions. There was a few funny like sound bites. The SEC lawyer said, well, Bitcoin is not a security because it has no ecosystem. It has no infrastructure. And I was like, there's like ordinals, there's stacks, a Lightning Network. I'm like, that's pretty bad argument. But anyway, I'll go through sort of like the major, the major argument. So the first one is the major questions doctrine. And this is sort of, I think you may have heard this a lot going around Twitter recently. So there's never been a congressional, ruling or a law that says, okay, crypto is a commodity, crypto is a security, or it's an investment contract, and it's going to be housed in the SEC, it's going to be housed in the CFTC. This is who's going to regulate it. That's never happened. So and this is one of Coinbase's big arguments, is that Congress first has to say what cryptocurrency is. And then the SEC, if that's where they want to have it, would, have rules. You would have public comment, and then those rules would be published. But, SEC's argument was quite interesting. They said the entire crypto market itself is essentially a rounding error. That's the exact word to use. It's a rounding error when you talk about the entire global financial market. And I thought that was interesting because they hired 20 people on their staff to go after cryptocurrencies. The SEC in the news lately is, maybe my news is skewed a little bit, but it's all about cryptocurrencies and going after them. And I was like, well, what's the percentage that the SEC is spending on this rounding error? And that was Coinbase's argument that, look, this is so new and so novel that the Howey test from 1946 was talking about oranges and orange groves. It has nothing to do with what's happening. The investment contracts in 2024 and the blockchain and the evolution of smart contracts and tokenization is something that we've not seen before. You can't say that this is the same thing that our standard, investment contract that you and I would think of if I'm investing in your business. This is completely different. And Congress needs to sort of speak to that before anybody steps foot in whether or not the SEC should be regulating this. And I think that's a really good argument. The judge was scared and mentioned, that hasn't been used a lot. And it's really sort of a big step for me to say that I can't do anything until Congress speaks. So I don't know if that is going to work. I mean, we won't know. It's going to be weeks or maybe a few months before the judge rules on this. So I think there's a lot of time for that to sort of play out. But I think that was a really, really interesting argument. And then the SEC sort of argued that, well, you don't really need a contract. Again, you can have a scheme. And, I think the language, and I'll just quote something here from the Edwards case, which is really important. The judge really went in depth on the Edwards case and talked a lot about it. So basically, you have to place capital or lay money in a way intended to secure income or profits from the employment of that money. So that's what the Security and Exchange Commission sort of missed, I think, is that you buy a token, it's more like a collectible. And that was talked about a lot. Beanie Babies were brought up, baseball cards were brought up. And, Coinbase was like, look, we're not investing in the ecosystem. We're not investing in the company. We are buying a token that could be a gas token, a utility token. It could be used in the ecosystem, but we're not buying into that company, expecting the company to do well. It's more along the lines of a baseball card or a collectible. And again, each cryptocurrency is different, but, we're sort of breaking it down into these 12. And I think that was a really good argument. And the judge really liked that argument and was like, and I think maybe bought it. And then the staking argument, she's like, well, I put my money in a savings account and it collects interest. How is that any different than taking USD, dropping it onto Coinbase's, in their platform and then getting a percentage? And the SEC lawyer really did not have a good answer for that. And I think that's going to go a long way. So, I think in the next few months, we're really going to see that a secondary sale of a cryptocurrency, and this was ruled in Ripple, it's not a security. It can't be. It's just two people exchanging, whether it's a commodity or whether it's a currency or, whether it is indeed was a security before, but now it's not because it's on the secondary market. I think we're going to see that come out. And this case is really going to trailblaze that and lead the way. But, to me, in my opinion, I do believe that the SEC is going to lose. Their arguments weren't very good, even though they had fantastic lawyers. I think they're just up against such a behemoth of Coinbase, and the institutional knowledge that Coinbase has on all of this is incredible. And I was just blown away by their lawyers. They actually, paid a lawyer for 5 hours to sit there. And I don't know how much he was paid to prepare. But the judge asked him, do you want to speak? And he said, Your Honor, I'm here to make any corrections that I notice along the way. And I have nothing to say. And she's like, well, you're awfully quiet. This is abnormal. He's like, this is the quietest I've ever been. And I'm sure he was making, $5,000-$6,000 just to show up for that, hearing. And there were, 7 law firms just like that for Coinbase there. And it was really interesting. So, I think that the SEC got it wrong on Bitcoin. It certainly has infrastructure, and Coinbase made that abundantly clear. Like, what's the difference? Bitcoin and Ethereum, and say Ripple, and brought up all these different options. And the judge really went into Chili's, like that. That was their token that she sort of talked a lot about. And I was like, that's a random token that we're talking about, but nonetheless. So in my thoughts, I really see the SEC trying to sort of enhance their power and grow their budget to be able to take on more enforcement cases. And it's sort of the natural iteration of a government agency. And I think Coinbase, unlike lots of different companies before it, they're like, come on, man, you think you've got the lawyers, like we're going to destroy you. And that's how I felt when I saw it. When I listened to it, I was like, man, I was thoroughly impressed, and my eyes were like, man, I just cannot imagine how much money Coinbase spent on preparing for this one just sort of esoteric random motion that they had in the case. So Judge Fela, though, was great, and she's very good. She was an Obama appointee. She's like 50 something years old. So to me, younger for a judge in the federal game. And I think that's really good. So, that's sort of my take on it. We'll see what happens, but I'm really thinking that secondary sales are really not going to be much of an issue after this case. That's just my thought process on it, and sort of the natural iteration of what's going to happen when Coinbase wins. And I think they will. So that's kind of my take on what happened with this case. I don't know if y'all have questions or anything you want to ask about it.
Well, I certainly like the implication, especially as it appeals to gaming, because if things turn out sort of the way that you see them, maybe these sort of, we've seen in-game assets that become NFTs in a couple of different ways. We've seen the, initial drop, mint, sometimes that even comes out before the game. But we've also seen what I see as more sustainable, which is, play to earn assets, or, whether it's berry and pixels that you're, exchanging crops for, or something in big time that you picked up in a boss dungeon. That's going to be a completely secondary sale ecosystem. So it seems, if things work out, gaming could be a good place to be as far as from a legal standpoint.
Yeah. And I think, we're going to get to the point of where when you have a token that you earn in the game, and it's literally to, buy the dance, buy the clothes, the way crypto works is you have to have it set up that it has some value so that you can trade it. If you don't want to earn it and you want to go buy it, that's great. I mean, that's sort of what the, game economy is for. Some people are going to be in there earning and then selling. Some people are going to be buying and then using. And I think that when it's such a utility and it's such an integral part of what crypto is inherently, to have that tokenization, to say it's a security is just going to squash the entire ecosystem and the entire economy on it. And, the US would be making a huge mistake to do that. And, I want to add also that there was a really large amount of amicus briefs. So there was even a senator, Senator Loomis, who wrote into the judge. So you can do that. You can get a lawyer to write in a letter that says, we agree with this side and here's why. She was talking about the major questions doctrine and saying that, she has legislation that they're working on to present to Congress to vote on about all the regulatory aspects of cryptocurrency. And that was very encouraging. And hopefully, that's able to be brought and, argued and talked about in Congress. And I think that would be amazing. And then, Coinbase is sort of, in the SEC's eyes, they're like, they don't really know what to call it. Because is it a broker? Because they're also sort of settling, large institutional money transfers. And the SEC said that, they've never approved anyone that is both, a broker and, one of the items, or one of the registered people who are going to settle things. And I found that really interesting. And the lawyer was like, there's nothing inherently illegal about it. There's nothing wrong with it. We've just never approved it before. And I was like, man, that's exactly what I hear from a lot of people who, and clients who try to actually register their crypto projects with the SEC. I believe they've approved one for registration, and it was like 6 years ago, and they've never approved another one. So if you try to be compliant and say, look, we don't know if this is security, you might think it is, so let's go ahead and try to register it with you, they won't approve it. And I think that was brought up as well. And I think that's a huge part to all of this. It's like the SEC is saying, oh, well, you've got to do this and you have to register these things. Okay, well, here's my registration form. Oh, no, we're not going to prove that. It's crypto. It's like, you can't say that. Like, that's really where the arbitrary and capricious comes in that you've heard tossed around a lot, where they have to have a backed, solid legal reason for denying it. And here's what it is. And they don't have that. And I think they're just saying, we don't like crypto. We're scared. It's all a security. And I think that's sort of coming out now, and their arguments, they're falling short. And that's my opinion on this. And I think it's going to really be great when this happens. And I'm sort of really looking forward to reading the ruling by the judge. And look, she may throw out one or two of the things. She may keep in staking. She may say staking's not a security. I mean, there's a lot of different options here. But, I think you'll get at least 3, maybe 4, all of them, that the SEC is going to lose on this. And that's after listening to the arguments, that's kind of my opinion. And especially the judge's questions. They were kind of leading, and I think she really caught on to what Coinbase was pushing and what the SEC was trying to sell. I don't think it's going to work for them.
Matt, what are your thoughts?
Man, it's a lot to unpack. I mean, it seems like most of the stuff that they're saying here is kind of ridiculous. I mean, it feels like almost everything, like you were saying with the staking, how is that really different than me putting my money in a savings account and earning interest? How is me trading a cryptocurrency different than me trading any other asset? How comparing so many things to collectibles, at the end of the day, it's also similar. It's kind of like, it's almost, we know at the end of the day, it's their job to push for as much regulation as possible. And then it's the companies and the people's job to push back. And then it lands somewhere in the middle. It feels like they're really overreaching on most of these fronts. And I think hopefully a lot of it will get thrown out and we'll find something. I think, at the end, a little bit of regulation wouldn't hurt crypto. We're seeing so many scams and so many people just doing ridiculous things that I think we do need some form of regulation. But obviously what they're asking for is it doesn't help anyone. And I think we have this problem a lot in America. One of the great things about it is that we do have so much freedom to sort of impose will and sue and do all of these things, but often that power is abused, and it gets to a place where, even I know we've all experienced like difficulties with KYCing in America or being able to access certain funds or trades or whatever because of even the current restrictions that we have imposed on us in the US. So, I agree with some of it to a point, but I think it hopefully is done in a fair way that still gives us the opportunity to be able to participate in what's going on in general in crypto.
Yeah, and let's remember that the SEC spent 6 months reviewing when Coinbase went public from a private company. They approved the registration statement, and this was like in April of 21, I believe. And the spot exchange, the prime, the wallet, and the staking were all part of that. They were all doing those things at the time they went public. The SEC reviewed it and approved it. Great, no problem. We have no problem with this. So for them to get the Wells notice, which is what SEC sends out to say, hey, we're about to sue you, back in March of 22, Coinbase, that day that it happened, was, I believe, speaking in front of Congress, talking about crypto regulation. And he's like, I got the Wells notice. I was probably like, here, Brian, like, this just came in. He's probably like, come on, Gary, like, are you serious? Like, get over it. So I think, I think good things are going to come of it. And I think we're going to get a lot of answers, and we need people like Coinbase to push the issue and not just let the SEC bully people like Stoner Cats, right? Stoner Cats had to pay the SEC $1 million for it to go away. We need, Coinbase to protect the little guys who don't have the money to spend. I mean, I wouldn't even know what this whole litigation would cost. Let's say you have to go to trial. I mean, millions of dollars, and and they're like, bring it on, we'll do it. And I love that about Coinbase, and I'm really happy that they're in our corner. Let's put it that way.
Me too. So to kind of move on, appreciate your legal expertise there, my friend. I want to talk a little bit about actually a related topic, GameStop. Unfortunately, we've seen that they've decided to kind of wind down their NFT marketplace due to continuing regulatory uncertainty in the crypto space. Um, I think it's a bit of a shame. It was kind of exciting when they came in, and that was kind of off the heels of the GME meme pumping. Um, so yeah, would love to just kind of get Matt, maybe start with you, just kind of get your take on, like, we're seeing a lot of people jump in, a lot of people jump back out. We've had the ETF, so there's some I'll say there's some more legitimacy given to the whole industry, but some people are jumping back out after they jumped in. What are we thinking here?
All right. Well, I'll start with maybe not the most popular take. I really don't think in the long run it matters. I don't think that GameStop was going to be able to do anything really effective in this space anyway. I think they're just a little bit too old of a company, a little too much red tape. And we just historically haven't seen that work well for anyone. All of the big companies that got in particular, the NFT market in the last few years on the last run, like, no one really did a great job. They're just not really built for that, and they're too big and they're too slow. I think that the implication of like, oh, GameStop's coming, yes, it adds legitimacy. People get excited, everything pumps a little bit, and then the hype is done, and then they don't really do anything from there, and they're kind of just taking up space. And more importantly, they're taking up funds. People that are coming into the space that don't know what to invest in, they don't know how to do the research. They're going to feel safer buying something that GameStop is involved in because it's GameStop. What could they have their thing. They're doing it right. They're whatever. So people are going to naturally gravitate to that don't know what they're doing. And the projects that really need the funding and are really doing the innovative type of things are going to lose out on some of that attention and some of that funding. So I still think, even though, yes, it brings a level of security and a level of endorsement to the space, overall it could be a net negative because they didn't really do much. Like, they had an NFT platform. I didn't even really know they did. Like, honestly, like, I kept hearing about it. I was like, is it even open? What's even going on? It would be much better for those people to be paying attention to what's going on IMX, or someone that's a little bit more native in the space and is building with a fresh start. Still sad to see them go. I love GameStop, but like, in 5 years, if they had stayed in, I don't think we would be like, GameStop was the one that revolutionized Web3 gaming. So long run, I don't think it matters too much.
Mr. Nicholas, how about you?
Yeah, I think those were great points. My sort of end take is very similar, that I don't think it moves the needle. I doing research pulled up their marketplace once, but it was essentially irrelevant. You never saw it coming up in any of the games that we were excited about. You really could be completely involved in gaming every single day, and there was never really a reason to go to GameStop NFT. The overall move, I have a very cynical view of, which is just, since the Reddit pump, they've been a hype driven stock. And it made a lot of sense in July of 2022 to latch onto a narrative that was going to potentially give them the next leg up. And then, even if they had the best intentions, utilizing that leg up to perhaps refinance or make themselves in a more strategic position. I don't want to put a negative connotation on it. We see it in a lot of the space, but, it's similar. We're seeing a lot of these sort of like companies closing down, and then or not closing down, but closing down divisions. And then they throw the reason of the day. So let's look at like when all the AI layoffs took place, whatever that was, 6 months, a year ago. ChatGPT was out for 15 seconds and companies were laying off 800 employees. That had nothing to do with AI, but everyone and their mother had all these employees that they wanted to lay off anyway. And they were like, ooh, now's a good opportunity. So it kind of like felt like that, like, okay, feel like we milked this. We didn't get what we wanted out of it. This is a great way to lay off all of these people who we brought on during the bull market, who maybe we had to pay a bunch, and they can always pivot back. So yeah, I think it's interesting in some ways. It's just like the kid in me who would bring all my games to GameStop and trade them in for a nickel, and somehow still had a positive view of GameStop. It's a little disappointing to see them go, but end of the day, agree, it's not going to move the needle.
Yeah, that's spot on. I love the
Yeah,
throwback this too.
you nailed it, Nick. You nailed that one.
So true.
All right, guys. So I want to kind of go into our last two topics here. Both of them are actually about Bitcoin, although from different sides of the spectrum. One of them is that obviously Bitcoin ETF got approved. Woohoo! We're all very excited about that. And we see that very unsurprisingly, Grayscale, BlackRock, and Fidelity are dominating the volume. A couple of conflicting takes here that at least I've seen in my research. Some of them are that we've actually gotten almost no new net inflows because all the volume has been people leaving the high fee Grayscale and moving into the lower fee BlackRock and Fidelity. Other people are saying no, there's actually been a couple hundred million, maybe a couple billion amount of inflows. Seen a couple of reports of BlackRock now having, over $1 billion of holdings of Bitcoin. So, just kind of curious as to what you guys' take on this is. Do we have any confirmations of whether there's been net inflows? Just kind of going to put this out there, whoever wants to take it.
Yeah, I mean,
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, back to the thing about would my mom play this game earlier, it's sort of like, is my dad buying Bitcoin? When my dad starts telling me that he's thinking about buying Bitcoin, I will know that it has now made it to the next level. My dad's heard of it. I talked to him last bull run. Hey, Dad, you interested? Nah, man, I'm not doing that stuff. That's where we were at in 2021, despite the news, despite the bull market, despite everything. We'll see if in 2024 we get there. But I think it's going to take a while for any real substantial inflows. We kind of knew that the ETF was just all of us trading on speculation. Like it's going to be a good amount of time before the sort of news gets passed down the chain enough to where we really see crazy amounts of retail money and new money that hasn't ever been in crypto, investing. I think it's going to be a bit. I mean, we have the halving coming up. There's a lot of news that does get people excited and is going to start to trickle into the media. But I would say at this time, I'm expecting things to just kind of chop along for a little while until we get some more hype built up.
Yeah, and I was going to say I've heard conflicting stories as well, but I think some of the more mainstream media has said it's about $1 billion in inflows. And to me, I mean, GBTC is one of those things where there are probably a lot of people that were ready to cash out and couldn't. And now that it got converted into the ETF, I think a lot of them have been, and a lot of them moving again to the lower fees for some of the other providers. But, to me, I think this is fantastic. I mean, we're going to have to see, the good and the bad. And with the ETF, we're going to probably be more in line with like things like the NASDAQ and, the huge investors who are, this is a risk asset and they're going to treat it as such. And so we'll have ups and downs more akin to, the NASDAQ and stocks where maybe we won't go as high. We won't see those insane wicks and, but again, it's crypto and we still have our altcoins for that. But, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's going to smooth it out. And I think over the long run, it's just going to be a slow grind up, just like the stock market is. And we'll have crashes along the way. But I think it's bullish. And, I've seen the $1 billion number and I think that's fantastic. I don't know why, what anybody was expecting. Like, it's not going to hit 100,000 this week. Like, we're good. Now people can sell their GBTC. Give them some time.
I was expecting a Dr. Evil 1 million Babylon Fafilian amount of Bitcoin to be bought by retail. I was really hoping everybody would pile in and instantly we would go to 100K, but I guess there's only so much hopium that can actually turn into reality, right?
Anything is possible.
Especially in this space. The only thing I would add, I think Jared and Matt and yourself really, really hit the nail on the head. Um, my whole take is let them fight. I'm just glad that it's not a blowout because I think from a bullish perspective, you actually want this to be close. So if BlackRock blew it out of the water on day one, they became the kingmaker, they're the dominant player, everyone else dried up. That just means you don't have to spend marketing dollars. Now, if you get a pissing contest between BlackRock and Fidelity, it's like becomes the Coke versus Pepsi thing, and you just get so many marketing dollars sort of like put into this. It's really ETFs, in my opinion, at least, are a winner take all game. I mean, you can make good money being number three from a provider standpoint, but when I'm going to buy a gold ETF or pick up USO or pick up the SPY, I'm not looking for the 10th most popular ETF. You want to be with the herd usually in these, not to put fees aside, but that's usually how it ends up working. So I think the fact that it's still competitive is going to yield to, more marketing dollars, more push, which I think is, certainly good for the space and for getting the word out.
Big win there. Totally agree. Final topic of the show. Ba, 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 ba. Okay, so we have Jamie Dimon in an interview saying that
Oh,
Satoshi is going to create more Bitcoin. Personally, I thought it was a little bit hilarious. However, just to kind of let me jump on Jamie Dimon's side for a second, just to not have us all just echo chamber one way. Um, okay, this guy's the head of one of the most powerful financial institutions on the planet. He literally sidestepped the 2008 financial crisis. He's had a history of kicking everybody's ass in the banking industry and the financial industry. Jamie Dimon. So he's a titan of Wall Street for sure. He may have a point, right? What happens if he's right? Well, that could be bad. I don't know how he could be right. I don't think he could be right here, but if he is right, that might come in and rug pull the entire industry, and maybe we should have a backup plan just in case. But, it is a little funny that he's like, on the one hand, they're definitely launching products that are blockchain related. They're definitely participating from the perspective of either it's ETFs or different products or whatever. They're definitely exposed to Bitcoin in some way. It's not going to take down their whole balance sheet, but they're exposed there, and then they have a huge amount of exposure from the perspective of money transfers, and they just collect so many fees when people are moving money around the world and executing payments that they have a lot to lose if cryptocurrency becomes the dominant financial system and blockchain. So, you know, on the one hand, it's like, yeah, maybe he could be right, and if he does, that would be very bad for the whole industry. But on the other side, he's so biased; it's hard to really like take him that seriously because the incentives show us where he wants to push the crowd. Want to open that up for
yeah.
discussion.
I think we have to also look at sort of the venue, right? He's in Davos. And I think that has a lot to do with it. I'm going to say, I mean, Jamie Dimon's a freaking genius. Like, he knows exactly who Satoshi is. I mean, come on. Like, if he wants a report on like the exact code of Bitcoin and what you would have to do to take over 50% of the computers and what that would be like to actually change the actual supply of Bitcoin, he could know that in an instant. He probably does. So I take a lot of what he says with a grain of salt. It was almost like he was joking. And in a way, maybe he mispronounced Satoshi's name to give a nod to the crypto guys. Like, I know, I'm going to call him Satoshi. I don't know. That's just kind of the way I took it. And I was like, because look, man, like you said, this guy was the way that we survived 2008. Like, right. He was the one that was like, oh, you need a couple billion? You got some. We'll buy you. Yeah, we'll take it all on. And he did, and it worked. And, to me, that was sort of like a magical moment, for JP Morgan, who's been around for forever. And, they didn't just like pick this guy out of the street. He's the man when it comes to banking. You don't get better than that. And so, for him to say that, I thought it was interesting. I don't know what, I'm certainly not as smart as he is. And what is his, game at the end of this? I don't know, but he's got something going on. He knows a lot more than he's laying on when he says those statements. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I I hadn't heard that. It's I think we can all hope that that's not true. I can't really see any world then that it would be. I'd have to kind of see or hear the clip for a little more context to understand if he's just, trying to shake things up, or maybe he wants to see the price go a little lower so he can scoop a little more on a dip. I don't know.
That's certainly something that has been, I've seen quite a few like Twitter accounts like post evidence of. Speaking of a guy who's got a lot of money to spend on lawyers, allegedly, that, would be shitting all over Bitcoin and then using entities controlled by JP Morgan to take that opportunity to then scoop up Bitcoin. So that's been a narrative in the space for a while. Jared, know you got to run. Thank you for your legal 2 cents on
Yeah,
that and for all
absolutely,
the
guys.
hosting
I,
and
I
such.
actually have a client waiting downstairs to meet. Matt, thank you so much. I'll make sure the recording works well on my end. And it was a pleasure talking to you guys as always.
Yeah, have a good one, man. Great talking to you.
Thanks, Jared. So, that speculation has been around for like quite a little while that, he might be doing a little bit of using his influence. But the guy is super well connected. You know, any dollars that go over FDIC support, I keep them at JP Morgan, not just for his skills, but because I think you can look at that '08 sidestep as just a guy who is super, super well connected and was sort of chosen as the prince to save the industry. Because you can, obviously, a lot of people have sort of mythologized him coming and stepping in and being the backstop to the economy. But if you drill into it, the US government held all the shitty stuff that was on the books. So it was really an opportunity to grow your bank, not have to take any of the garbage and buy all the good stuff at a huge discount. So if you had the backstop and you had the firepower and you were chosen as the kingmaker, all that to say, it's not something that I think will like make or break the industry. I wish we had, a Jared level of insight just on the Bitcoin blockchain itself. I'm sure there's a couple Bitcoin blockchain enthusiasts who are screaming, that's impossible for this reason. And we checked the code and, but an interesting headline definitely gets like a good stir. At the end of the day, they're heavily involved in the space and are going to benefit, immensely. So, definitely some cross currents there.
100%. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for your time here. Matt, thank you for coming and being a guest. I know you've been a long time citizen as we've discussed. So yeah, always excited to connect with more citizens and get more perspectives here on the show. Just kind of want to invite you to share any final thoughts here as we wrap up, and maybe give us a little bit of hopium to be able to end the show on and marinate and sizzle on as we go off into the nether worlds of crypto.
I'll do my best. Don't put the back of crypto, the bulk of it on my shoulders right now. But thank you guys first of all for having me on. Like I said, I've never sold anything in Neo Tokyo. It's the project in the space that I'm the most bullish on, that I'm the most excited about. So really cool that you guys are doing the show, and it's really cool what all the holders are doing in the community. I think from like the opportunities that have come through the Sit Cap Fund, and just seeing the activity on Twitter, knowing now that we've been through a bear and this is the second bull, and Becker and Elio is still here, still pushing. Everyone has really come together, and we've seen a lot of really amazing projects enter the space and enter the community. So I'm personally more bullish than I've ever been on the project and on the opportunities there. I think that the biggest thing, for us all to remember, I always remind myself this now, it's my third bull run being a part of, is that there's going to be a lot of bumps along the way. There's so many new things happening, whether it's SEC, some legal action, whether it's a 20-30% dip on a red day on some weird news. All of that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. And we're looking at zooming out, 2 to 3 to 5 to 10 years from now. And this is the early stages of something that's going to change gaming, change communication, change finance forever. And if you could have gone back and invested in the idea of video games when the Atari was made, or you could have invested in the first iPhone when it was created and everybody thought it was a joke and no one was going to switch from BlackBerry, That's the type of opportunity that I see that's happening here. These gaming studios that are being created out of so little funds with people with a brilliant idea, and they're coming in and just getting funded and creating incredible games. It's all happening behind the scenes. And, I just really encourage people to not get impatient. It's going to take time. It might not happen tomorrow, but you have to look at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that this is inevitable. Gamers, creators, everybody wants this to happen. And at the end of the day, the gaming studios, they can do whatever they want. Wherever the gamers go, wherever the streamers go, that's where the attention goes and that's where the money goes. So if you look at the big picture of this is a good thing for streamers and gamers and people to be able to own in-game assets and have more control, and for small game studios that have incredible ideas to basically crowdfund and be able to source resources from their communities, it's all good for them. And they're the ones that are going to drive the eyeballs and drive the attention. So if you're in the space now, if you're watching something like this, you are so early. Even if you missed a 3x or a 5x the last few months, things aren't going anywhere. They're only going to build, and there'll be some bumps in the roads, but stay for the long haul because it's going to be crazy. It's something that I haven't really ever had the chance to experience in my lifetime, in my investment career, my investment journey. So I'm so excited to be here, and thanks again, guys, for having me.
And on that note, I want to wish everybody a wonderful rest of your day, rest of your week, and we'll see you next time on Interlinked.
Good night, guys.
So can you